call the meeting to order now at 5:30, and we're gonna roll into roll call. Marty Gator.
Here.
Marianne is not here. Amy Cubbage.
Here.
Counselor Evans isn't here. Counselor Storr isn't here. Jerry is resigning from the committee. Philip is not here right now. Leah is not here. Pete Knox.
I am here.
You are here. And Susan isn't here today. Oh, and Leah's going to be late. Sorry, Leah's going to be 30 minutes late. So I'm going to capture that for the meeting minutes here or notes.
Does that mean that I get to go to my baseball game?
Oh, Mike is where you are, Mike. Sorry.
Oh, I am here.
Thank you, Mike. Perfect. All right. And I have no preliminary remarks at this point right now. And we have no announcements or additions to the agenda. Camille, any audience participation?
Yes, it looks like we do have one. Just one moment here. Let me share my screen.
Okay, and I appreciate the participation. I just wanted I'm to read the comment notes prior to the Rob speaking. Is that correct? This is my first time having an audience participation, so I appreciate everyone's patience. To indicate that you'd like to provide testimony, please raise your hand. Use the raise hand button. For those attending via phone only, press *9 on your phone to raise your hand. When it's your turn to speak, you'll be called. For those attending via phone only, the last 4 digits of your phone number will be called. Please state your name, city of residence, who you are representing for the audio record. Once you have provided testimony, your hand will be lowered. Please do not raise your hand again. Only one opportunity to speak is provided. For those unable or not wanting to speak publicly, testimony may be provided via email at clerk@ltd.org. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per community member. A timer will be displayed on the screen as you see here and will beep when the 3 minutes are up.
Thank you, Alma. And we have Rob Saco wishing to provide testimony. Rob, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you, Alma. Thank you, members of the Strategic Planning Committee. I'm Rob Zaco. I reside in Eugene. I'm Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. And I just want to speak to you briefly today about strategic planning and provide a little context. I think it was 6 years ago, then General Manager Aurora Jackson was new to LTD, and there was a board retreat, and she was trying to figure out what her job was with LTD. I was there as the Boy Scouts on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Eugene. And she looked at a bunch of plans that LTD had and other organizations had, and she indicated to the board that she didn't feel like there were plans that were specific enough to give her direction as general manager of what she was expected to do. And it was at that time that she called for a 10-year strategic business plan. Now, of course, today LTD has developed a document that bears that name, but my understanding is it's really not what AJ needed or was asking for. What we have before us today is more of an operational plan or a benchmarking plan. It provides metrics that can be checked, but doesn't talk about sort of longer range investments and priorities. So I think there's still a need for LTD to have a strategic business plan, obviously something for this group to look at. I mention that because I've been talking to LTD board members recently, and one of them was saying he doesn't know what LTD's goals are and would like, when there's a new general manager, to have a goal setting session so the board can be clear on what the organization is trying to achieve. I think today we don't have a new general manager. It's premature. I'm only mentioning this to you today because you only meet every 3 months. So I just want to kind of drop this idea for you to consider. Best looks forward to there being a new general manager. We look forward to the board work with that new general manager to set clear goals and to figure out a strategy to achieve them, and for the Strategic Planning Committee being part of that process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. And Alma, I'm not showing anyone else indicating they would like to speak, so I will hand it back to you.
Thank you, Camille. All right, so the first agenda on our item on our agenda right now is the GM recruitment update. And I'd like, before Mark jumps in, to share that I think that the SPC team does, we'd like to have some feedback or give some commentary as well. So after you go, we will go ahead and make sure we share.
No, that's great. That was the intended part of it. Just to give you an update where we are, maybe debrief your involvement in the last process and give us any feedback for moving forward, which, is important, part of this committee is kind of help us move forward. So, yeah, ultimately we're going back out. So, we've TransPro was hired to bring us a general manager, and they haven't fulfilled that obligation yet. So they're going back out, and the candidates they brought in were good candidates. The fact of the matter is, the one that we wanted just couldn't quite get here, and so they've started the process. Kind of going back out to look for new candidates. They hope to have the candidates bring a pool of candidates for board consideration sometime. It'll probably be sometime in early August. It would be my guess, given what I'm hoping that we can have that at the August board work session. So that's kind of the target we're hoping for, where we can start at least narrowing down candidates and talking through that. And then, of course, it takes a little bit of time to manage everybody's schedules and, get all our committees together and all of the public process together. And so my guess that won't happen until probably mid-September sometime, once we're able to, get through everyone's schedule. So that's kind of the timeline and where we're at. We'll keep pushing forward as good as we can. And so now it's, really, anything that input that you have about the process or something you'd like to see different, that's just certainly what we'd like to hear at this point.
Thanks, Mark. Right before you do that, I just want to recognize that Philip has joined us. Thanks for being here, Philip. And I will open for SPC members and team to share reflections and recommendations going forward with the GM search. I have a few, but I'll let the team speak before I do. Mike, go ahead.
So Mark, I did respond to your note with some thoughts. Most of the comments that I made were along the lines of making sure that nobody can second guess LTD on the process that was used and sort of protect LTD legally. One of the comments that I made, though, had to do with schedules. And I am on the LCC board, which had a very successful search completed just recently, and have been a part of numerous public agency searches. And one of the things I know from those experiences is that if we are going to be successful in engaging the public, we need to let people know as soon as we have a good idea what the schedule is going to be for public engagement, so that they can start penciling dates in on their own calendar. So that's just one of the comments that I wanted to make that I think will help to ensure public engagement and that people can get it on their calendars.
Yeah, no, scheduling is always a challenge in these things for sure. So we will take that to heart.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else on the committee have any other feedback or anything they want to share? I know that a few of us got to participate on the panel, which we appreciated being at the table. Marty, you've come off mute.
Yeah, I actually didn't get a chance to raise my hand, sorry, but I was going to say I did appreciate being a part of the process. There were some things that I saw with the communication we had with you as far as suggestions moving forward. I like the process. I was, to Mike's point, just making sure that to protect LTD, ourselves, and whatever the case may be, just to make sure all the processes are in place, because, I think it's a very delicate process to make sure that, notes and whatever we do and whatever observations that we take down. I made sure I brought my notes back because I had to make sure they were legible, because I don't write the best in the world, but I did type everything out just to make sure they could be clear. But I did like being a part of that process, just to kind of give us a little bit more of a personal feel. So I definitely wanted to be involved with that. So I enjoyed it. It's definitely
great. Well, we appreciated you participating for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Marty, for that. And I know I want to be thoughtful too. If anyone else has anything to share, I would love to hop in. So I think, to Mike's point about the process that they went through at LCC, I feel like, as our mission or our vision at LTD is connecting the community, looking for more opportunities to make sure that we are, especially if you think about folks that are coming in from out of town or out of the state, or, being able to look at a sort of a collaborative of folks, like the other leaders in the community, that maybe having them be more engaged sooner than later on that front end. I know there's part of that, but there are folks that are not only leaders, but like maybe other folks that have been a sort of I don't say imports, but folks that have moved here to this community from outside who maybe are in a leadership position that can also help with that process and kind of answer any questions. And I think that those are some of those things for like a sort of a welcoming committee to be able to help with some of the process. And again, this is just as an observer on the outside looking in. And that kind of comes back to our connecting the community role that we play at the LTD plays in the community. And I think another piece, and again, I not knowing all the back end, like we got to participate as a panelist, which was lovely, but also maybe, again, I don't know what the process is about kind of being clear about the current needs and priorities for LTD. And I know that you have a recruiter that's helping with that process, but just maybe bringing a few more local folks that are in those leadership roles to the table to help with that. That might be another piece that can help. So obviously.
Yeah, so I'm and I don't know if you're aware, you might not know if you're aware of the whole process we used to, get this point. I mean, initially to kind of get our job description and characteristics and things, we had, I think like 15 focus groups and met with, almost 90 people, to develop those. So there was a pretty good public involvement right up front to get to that. And so I didn't know if you're aware of that. I think you were, but also I'm guessing, what would you like to see added to that part of it? Because that's what it sounded like you were saying. So
yeah, and I'll follow up with an email as well. But I think about just getting more of our community leaders involved. And again, one of the things that I was thinking about is like, we're not reinventing the wheel, right? We're trying to consult and glean feedback from others that, as Mike had said, Mike's been on the public hiring committees, and this is not a criticism of the LTD's process. It's just like, how can we, I think as a community, like build those best practices, in these different sectors too, and see what some of the other folks have done, and thinking about ways to connect some of the other new leaders as they're coming in together. So once that general manager gets hired as well, maybe there's like a cohort of new leaders in the community that we can bring together so that there's that support. And maybe even thinking about some new leaders who have been recently hired in Lane County, if we can bring them to some of the panels or the meet and greets too, as that new person's coming in and thinking about whether or not they're going to join this community. It just kind of helps see that it just helps people feel welcomed and be like, oh, there's other people like my little cohort that's going to be here to support me in this process. So just thinking about some of those ideas.
That's a great idea. And those are discussions I was having with the leaders, actually trying to bring in the folks we were trying to bring in, right? Because knowing that they would need some support. And so, those are discussions we will have and did have actually. But it's a great idea. I mean, they need support. Anybody moving from out of state really, kind of needs some help to get grounded in Eugene and Springfield for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And again, I think to Mike's point too, if just looking at the timeline going forward, then we can also as SPC, it'd be lovely if we could reach out to folks and say, hey, please make sure you put time on your calendar to be at this, be here, be available. So that's one of the roles that we can be helpful to you as well. Okay, Amy?
Thanks, I really like the point you made about kind of welcoming folks to the community. And, as much as we're interviewing these candidates, they're interviewing us and they're trying to get to know Eugene, and they're trying to determine if this is a place where they could, see themselves being successful as a leader and being here with their family. So I think, doing our part to kind of introduce them to Eugene as much as we can during a short amount of time is awesome. Mark, I remember hearing that there's kind of this thought of maybe expanding the search to include folks that don't have as much experience in transit, but more government, public agency type of experience. Were there any other kind of lessons learned during this process that are being applied to this second round effort, or any feedback that you got from the candidates on the process and how it might be improved?
In fact, we just talked to Caitlin talked to our preferred candidate yesterday, and she shared with me that, he was very complimentary of the district, of the community, of the process, had, really nothing bad to say about any of it. It was just really his family situations that he couldn't quite get over the hump on. And so, the feedback has been really good from all the candidates in terms of process. So, I don't think we're scaring people off by process. Good. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of movement right now in not only in our industry, but, a lot of places in for general managers or city managers or county administrators. And so, they are looking a little more broadly, maybe, to, really try to say, okay, we don't necessarily need a transit professional, but we need a good leader, right? And a good leader can come from, we do want, public sector experience is helpful. It's really difficult for somebody from the private sector and no public sector experience to come into a public agency and hit the ground running. So, but there's some out there. I've seen it happen. And so, I think they're just really looking for people who fit the characteristic profile of what, the board and the community said they wanted. So, yeah.
Marty?
Yes, something that keeps hitting my brain on a regular basis is the constant needs we talk about and the channels we're communicating them through, right? So I know, like, we've got this search agency that's helping us to find this potential candidate, and I don't know whatever they use to find the candidates, but I also look at our particular needs just on this committee, filling seats because we have vacancies here, getting information from the community at large as far as some of the things that they need. I raised this question in email. What channels are we using? Because I just think about, from my past experience working in media, communicating messages back and forth, and just the segmentation of a message just back in the day over 3 types of mediums: news, paper, print, radio, and television. That was difficult. And now there's all these different channels. What is our primary way of communicating what's going on to the masses, so we can make sure that something is being repetitive enough that we're getting through to people and we're hearing what's being said? Like our community comment today, fantastic to hear that we're right on that page, because that's where we're at right now. How do we make sure we have a plan? Because we should be able to filter that to the board. We can guide the board as a committee.
So is this on the topic of the GM search? Are you asking where are they reaching out?
Literally, it's kind of a big collective for me, because I'm still trying to get my mind around, from a GM search to talking to the general public as a whole.
There's different processes, and we use all the social media that we have. Which includes Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We use all of those. But then the search firm, they focus on other areas. They focus on LinkedIn. That's our primary source, and Indeed, and there's some other outlets that tend to be the biggest bang for your buck, I guess, for in this current age. It doesn't really pay to put it in the newspaper anymore, right?
No, it doesn't.
And so they had to change. So they use a lot of the digital means to reach out, and getting noticed hasn't really been a problem as far as candidates go. I think they screened 34 candidates last time, and so
I think it's good to know, though. I think it's great that we did well. It's just timing, it sounds like, really.
Yeah, ultimately, it was just unfortunate, for timing wise, for sure. So, but and certainly any suggestions you have as you're looking through our digital outlets and whatnot, and any advice that you can give us or any suggestions, we're more than open to that. So.
Okay.
And maybe it would be helpful actually to have our Pat Walsh and his team come in and do a presentation to you about their strategy as far as communications goes, and when we blast things out when we don't, and why we do it, and share with you some of that in a future meeting.
Yeah, that'd be good.
All right, folks, in terms of the GM search conversation, are there anything else from anyone? Mike?
I just had one last thought pop into my head. As we are inviting people from the public to engage, it seems like the way we approach them is important as well, that we want to make sure that they know that part of the reason we're asking for their engagement, not just their input, their engagement, is so that they recognize that they own a chunk of this. They are that they have a stake in the success of our transit agency, and we want them to feel that kind of ownership. So I think that comes across in how we ask them to participate.
Yeah, it was an interesting balance and that's really a good point, Mike. It was an interesting balance as we were, trying to put together the public forum to say, do you just blast it out and let anybody come, or do you specifically invite people who we know have an interest and we know, have showed an interest in LTD in the past, right? And so that was kind of what we didn't want to happen is, for instance, have one neighborhood group with 30 people show up and like, okay, that's not quite what we wanted here. So that's a really good point, and it's sometimes a hard one to manage, but we'll certainly take that into consideration.
There is one more thing that pops into my head, and this might be a little bit sensitive, but in other, certainly in my life at the university, as we were trying to attract a wide range of applicants to positions, we were cognizant of the fact that to a lot of people, we look like a pretty monolithic community, and they may not see the diversity here that would make them feel comfortable. And I'm not sure exactly what, but I think that there are specific strategies that we can build into the search process, particularly as we invite people to the community, to ensure that we recognize that it can be a bold step for a person who's underrepresented to come here, and that we are fully prepared to first of all acknowledge that, and secondly, provide the kind of support that is necessary for a person who might be feeling a little bit out of place here, to be comfortable and to make sure that they know that once they get here, they have ownership, and and we're counting on their leadership, and we also want to support them in their leadership.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And one point Alma made earlier about kind of a welcoming committee, I met with Jameson, in fact, and his wife the night he came, the first night, took him out to dinner. just kind of talk to them. And then each of the candidates, I had Perry Adams meet with another one, and then Pat Walsh meet with another one. I'll just took them out to dinner and, you know, kind of welcome the community, talked a little bit about the community, and it was pretty interesting because you know, Jameson kind of looked around the restaurant and, you know, like, so is the whole community like this? And it's like, well, yes. You know, I said, you know, we've got, you know, we're diverse, but not, you know, not that way. And so anyway, and it was actually more of a concern for his wife, and he's a mixed race family. And so, you know, and they could have got over that, but there were just some other things that, you know, didn't quite work out. But yeah, I mean, that's a hill for this community to climb, right? When we're bringing people of different backgrounds in, for sure.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Mark. And I do think that so I will send my response to the GM search in the email, capturing some of what we talked about as well. And I do think there's some best practices we as a community are building and can continue to build. And I think there's some others we can, collaboration is huge. That's the only way we're going to be successful in moving the dial and bringing people from all different backgrounds into our community. So looking forward to more of that. And I want to be thoughtful because we are at 5:56 and it is now time. If we have more feedback or comments about the GM search, let's take those offline, and we're going to move into the strategic business plan quarterly update with Kalina.
Thank you.
Here, Kalina. Thank you, Mark. Oops, you're on mute.
I could unmute. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having me tonight. Going to take an opportunity to go over with you our latest update for the strategic business plan. Just to share with you, I think we've might have shared previously that Kim Lay, our previous strategic business plan project manager, has moved on to pursue other endeavors. As the project champion, I'll be stepping in to provide the quarterly updates along with Amy Reichert. And I might have been sharing the wrong, I want to make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Yes. Okay. Sorry. I'll be stepping in to provide the quarterly updates along with Amy Reichert, who is our IT project manager and the current data guru for this project, as well as Nicole Cleary of TransPro that you'll meet a little later for meeting in subsequent meetings. Together, we will continue to manage our district's strategic business plan. And this is our second quarterly progress update for fiscal year 2022, covering our progress for Q3 or quarter three, the period January to March 2022. Today, we'll recap the quarter two results, discuss our quarter three progress, and provide a sneak peek into what to expect in our Q4 results. Of course, you see here our mission, vision, and values that were updated during the development of our strategic business plan. Hopefully, you've seen the slide in all of the district presentations. It serves as a reminder of what we are striving to achieve, why we do what we do, and how we will accomplish our success outcomes. To measure our progress, LTD has selected 24 metrics to score across the 5 strategic focus areas and to help keep us focused on the right priorities. Our goal is achieving a perfect score of 100 by 2024. Scores are calculated by an independent third-party consultant, that's TransPro, based on the metrics that we report each quarter. All of the tactical efforts we are undertaking is in service of achieving our key success outcomes across our 5 strategic areas of focus. In quarter two, we achieved 45.6 out of an overall 100 points, representing 17% completion. In our quarter two status provided in February, we previously reported the total points attained as 45.8. We made a correction in employee engagement as a result of an update to the milestone progress to not yet started. As we are tracking and continuing to verify data, we'll continue to provide these types of updates to the metrics, which is similar to the restatement of the quarterly jobs report that we can see often. The report is provided on time. However, if additional information comes in after the reporting period, the prior reports are adjusted and adjustments are noted at the time of the next report. Also, as a reminder, you may notice that we actually scored more than our target. The scoring methodology allows us to overachieve by up to 33%. And even so, we should expect to move the dial each quarter. With that, here are our 5 strategic areas of focus and our progress through the end of Q3. You'll see that both the customer satisfaction and employee engagement surveys have just concluded. We will have more information to report on both of those in Q4. It's noteworthy to state that our customer satisfaction survey received 2,277 responses. This is greater than our prior year's responses, and it far exceeds the minimum 100 responses that were required to participate in the survey performed by the American Bus Benchmarking Group. For community value, we want to establish a baseline and then improve on it by 5%. Since we've never formally measured our value to the community, we will be conducting a community value survey in the late summer, early fall of this year. For financial health, we are still on track to achieving our 3-year rolling financial plan target. We're focusing on 3 things to keep the district financially healthy. They are board-informed decision-making through the new quarterly reports, developing reserves to mitigate the impacts of unexpected economic disruption, 2 of which the board has recently adopted. And lastly, we're focused on continuous improvement to increase the cost efficiency of our service delivery. Lastly, we've reduced our overall greenhouse gas emissions by 77% since fiscal year 18, which currently exceeds our goal in sustainability. In Q3, we achieved 47.7 points out of an overall 100 points, representing 22% completion. As a reminder, we've selected 31 projects internally that will contribute to achieving success in our strategic areas of focus. Each tactic has a clear milestone, goal, owner, and team. These projects do not represent all that the district does. Solely, these are key activities that we've identified and key initiatives that will drive the success of those strategic areas of focus. Here you see our progress report for Q3. And I'll give you a moment to just take a look at those. So in next quarter, we have many plans. We're targeting tactics and metrics that missed their mark last quarter, namely those around customer satisfaction and employee engagement. With the completion of those surveys, we will be able to establish our baseline and to begin to implement recommendations based upon those results. As mentioned earlier, we will be conducting the customer value survey in late summer, early fall. We will also perform our refresh activities, which will be coming in the next few weeks, which is a part of the normal cadence and activities involved in the strategic business plan. We are implementing tactics and measuring our successes in a manner that has not been done before at LTD. The first 1 or 2 quarters is about calibration, getting the system in place, and we're learning as we go. As this was our first year, and as Mark often says, we didn't know what we didn't know, this will be a great opportunity for us to perform a post-mortem of activity this year and to integrate the lessons that we've learned in year 1 into year 2 of the strategic business plan. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions and or comments.
Anything from the committee? Thanks for joining us, Leah. I see Marty.
Hello, yes, thanks. That was a great presentation, and I appreciate it. I had a question about the employee engagement, the scorecard, and the community values. So I see that, I understand the plan. Do you know what caused the zeros? Is it just?
Yeah, sure. So, you know that we've had quite a bit of what we call attrition. So in our human resources, our current director of human resources, Perry, is our second director in that arena in 2 years, our third in as many. So just sharing that with that, that team has been working diligently, but in terms of having a leader and someone to track that and push those efforts along, that department has just really been trying to maintain and really help. They've been focused on recruitment. So where that's concerned, in terms of employee engagement, they have just completed that, and they are currently rolling that out department by department and breaking it down and doing some assessments. Within the next week or two, as directors, we'll get together and we'll talk about what the baseline is and what activities we will do to push us forward into Q2. But in the next update, you'll actually see what that baseline is, and Perry will be available to discuss that.
So it's just missing data.
Yes, it is. It totally is.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, we just hadn't done the survey, and the survey is a basis for, for measuring that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was like, what did I miss?
Yes,
Okay,
no worries.
my bad. Thank you.
And so what I will just add to that is that's why you'll see in the next quarterly update, it'll look like we went from 0 to, 10 or something like that. And you're like, what happened? It's just that we are going to go back and follow up what activities have they completed in the prior quarters and get them all caught up, because they have been working toward it, just didn't have a person in place to report.
Cool, I got it. It's just sometimes I see numbers and the information didn't connect, so maybe you just had to just say it again so it is connected. So thank you. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you, Marty.
Thanks, Kalina. Thanks, Marty. Anyone else have any questions or responses? Really do appreciate you coming through and kind of, again, this succinct response, being able for us to see kind of this dashboard. I really do appreciate this, Kalina, because this is helpful for us to, like, we didn't have numbers in here not long ago. Now we have some information. It's lovely to be able to see this and to have something to measure against. All right. Well, I want to be thoughtful and give folks a second to think if there's any hands that want to be raised right now and respond. Awesome job, Kalina. Oh, looks like, yep, no hands. Looks like awesome job. We got what we need and really appreciate this and looking forward to the next update. So, and yeah, looking forward to, I think we're all in that space. A lot of folks are trying to get some consistency so we can do any of our internal surveys and get some, like, no more people moving around and changing jobs. Like, we all got to stay put so we can gather the data that we need. So we're all in that, many of us are in that boat. Thank you very much, Kalina, for your time. And I'm excited that we are 2 minutes above, ahead of schedule now. So appreciate your time, Kalina. If there's no other feedback, we can move on to our committee purpose and schedule. All right. So I think this has been a conversation that's been going on for a while, kind of like understanding and getting clarity around the purpose of the Strategic Planning Committee. And we have our agenda piece in here that kind of talks a little bit about the history. Tom is out of the country right now, and so he shared, we met, Marty, myself, Tom, and Mark met to just talk about the agenda and then also the intent of this conversation. And I want to be really thoughtful because there's many folks that bring a lot of experience as leaders of this committee, from the inception to prior to Marty and I volunteering, thanks to Mike, and kind of going forward. And so we just want to be really thoughtful, one, about the time that the volunteers are spending on this committee, and then the staff time, because this is also, you know, an investment. And then also being able to have the most, where we can make the most impact to be able to help support and fill in any gaps, support the board, and be very intentional about the time that we have here. So I want to, we have a couple of pieces of materials that we have the bylaws from 2017. And then we also have SBC Future Drivers Brainstorm, I think draft, and that's also from 2017. And I want to check in really quick about, Mark, one of the things that we talked with Tom about were if there were, what Marty and I had requested was looking at the calendar, the spots that the board are going to need to make big decisions about. And are there places that the SPC can look at and say, we would like some input on these particular projects, how can we be able to help support that? So I'm sharing the part that Marty and I had talked with Tom and Mark about, and I want to share that with the committee, and then also see if Mark and I believe Cosette, you're jumping in as well to share. So I just want to say that's where we came to, like, say, where can we be helpful for the board? Where can we fill in gaps? And potentially where could we be a funnel to train folks around transit, and what's important as a sort of a low barrier opportunity to have that get people on our board of directors who are coming in as leaders to support LTD that have that transit experience. So that could be another role that we play. So now I'm going to step back from there, and Marty's raising his hand. I'm not sure if it's for this. I'll let Marty continue, and then we can move it on to Mark and Cosette.
Yeah, just and another addition to that, again, for Marty, always Mr. Visual as best as possible. The point that I tried to raise as the clarification point for me on SPC is realistically, the board is always going to have both short-term, long-term goals, plans in place. And as the strategic planning committee, we're kind of like the navigation unit on the Star Trek Enterprise. So it's to help that big ship from hitting the minefield or the Klingons or the Borg or whatever the case may be. Hopefully getting all the information we possibly can moving forward, we can advise the board and the board members the best course of action from what we've heard, what we've found, what information. So that seemed to resonate and made it clear for me and myself and for Alma as well. And I hope the rest of the committee members as well, as kind of how I see us as a group, collective group moving forward. Getting that information and making sure that we're clearing it out for the board to make the decision they need to do to make things better for LTD.
Thanks, Marty. Mark and Cosette, did you have anything before we hop in on our chat?
Just to let you know, I do have those handouts available. I can pull those up if you'd like, and I'd also be happy to take notes and help facilitate however I can.
Appreciate that, because I think one of the things I just looking at how long the list is, and so when I look at, we have considerations on the agenda. There are six considerations here about where we can focus as the committee, and then we also have the bylaws, and then there's this like a brainstorm, a brainstorm document here. And I want to be really, and I want to be really thoughtful, because there's a lot of things, and what would be really helpful. And again, I'm speaking for myself, and I think it'd be really helpful to hear. There's this long brainstorm list of things, but what is necessary for LTD? Like, what do you all need from us to be able to inform the board about, or to be able to get deep and dive deep in? And I think one of the things that I think Mike was sharing with us was that I think when Leah was in the chair before, and again, this was prior to COVID, I think, where we were able to be at tables and meet and huddle together. We were able to take some space to deep dive and to look at some of like a project or a topic or an area. And that's kind of again, and I would love to hear it from you, Leah, about this. I think that's the space where it's like, I would prefer, if you're like, we're going to put an agenda together so this committee can have something to do. I'm like, no, don't do that. Like, we want to be here to work and get you what you need. So I would like for us to be really intentional about that. How can we augment the board and get deep in a space and make a recommendation that the board doesn't have to, and then staff can just focus on getting us that. We can dive deep into it, take it back, and the board can can vote on that. So that's just kind of what I want to share. Like, there's a laundry list of information, but kind of like the big picture pieces. And again, Leah, I'd love to hear from you, any feedback that you have from these documents that have been shared, and also staff, the areas that the board is going to need to make some big decisions on. How can we help augment and support?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because, the deep dive, because that's one thing the board really doesn't have time to do, right? And so having a committee that can actually get into some of this stuff and make really good recommendations based on good discussions and good community discussions and good information is really helpful to the board. And so then the question is, okay, what are those, you know, big decisions where to be helpful? And, you know, certainly there's some, you know, big things coming up around moving ahead. I think those will be ongoing discussions that'll be really valuable over the next couple of years. I think that some of the stiff discussions, you know, as far as projects and those kind of things will be, and that's coming up in, I think, fall sometime. And so what I hope to provide, though, and we didn't hear, but is a timeline, you know. So these are the things that are coming up. Here's the timeline of kind of decision making, and you know, then you can see, okay, you know, good, you know, we're going to be diving into this, you know, in the next month or two, and the board decision is here. So so we're really thoughtful about what we provide you and when, so we can get, you know, really good information to you prior to the board making decisions. So Cosette, do you have any thing to add there on
I think you got it, Mark. I think we did discuss that we work on putting together a work plan for the board, and that work plan can help inform the topics and the timing of the decisions that the board will be making. And again, this is a committee that is intended to provide independent recommendations and independent advice to the board. So, you know, it's really valuable and important that you all have an opportunity to weigh in a timely way and in a knowledgeable way. So, that's all.
Thanks. Is that Marty? You have your hand up? Oh, excellent.
Sorry, I'm still up from before.
No worries. And I think, again, what you just said, Cosette, you know, this is the goal is to be an independent body that's being able to respond. I think being able to have that time is also helpful for us, because it can also help me go and talk to community members about things too and get feedback. And I think that's one of the spaces that I'd like to be able to have more intention around that, where I can digest some of the information when we see it earlier. So to come to these meetings and say, you know, this is what I'm hearing, and to be that voice of the folks that we represent and the roles that we have. Some of us are representing just the community, but some of us have other folks that we can, I'd love to be able to bring that to the table. So to see what the work plan is for the board, or even know the pieces around that, that would be helpful, I think, for this committee. And I think also something that came out of the community comment today about, and again, I'm trying to be thoughtful about the space here, but we have the strategic plan with LTD, but also some of the, like looking at like the strategic business plan, like what are some of the goals and pieces ways that we can be helpful around that as well. So I just want to throw that out there. Mike, your hand is up. I'll let you go next.
Yeah, I was on the MX committee as we transitioned into the strategic planning committee, and there were two things. Well, one primary thing that was that the board members who are on the strategic planning committee, the intent for them was to serve primarily as a communication link back to the board from the strategic planning committee. And along with that, in keeping with the strategic planning committee being independent, the idea was not that the board members who are on the strategic planning committee would guide a lot of the discussion, but would rather do more listening to that conversation so that they could convey that back to the board. And certainly the board has the prerogative to accept our advice or, you know, go in a totally different direction. But the idea of the strategic planning committee was to provide an independent community advice to the board. And then the other point that I wanted to make was that I have very fond memories of the days when Leah and Amy worked together. You alluded to this, Alma, to ensure a process that gave the strategic planning committee a method by which we could do the deep dives in it. And you kind of turned to Leah to ask for some input, and we didn't ever get to Leah. So I just want to shut up and listen to Leah for a minute.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I'll let Amy go first here. I see her hand up.
Are you sure, Leah? It doesn't matter to me. Okay. So I just thought I would share my own opinion on this. You know, from my experience working with Leah in the chair, co-chair roles, that I think, you know, in order to have this focused, engaged, productive discussion as a committee, that we should only be meeting when there's a specific decision that the board needs to make that they want us to weigh in on. So that's going to mean that board and or staff need to provide us with kind of they need to help frame that decision and determine exactly what kind of advice they're looking for from us. Then, you know, from there, we have a frame to say, okay, this is the topic, this is, you know, this is the conversation we need to have, what we need to discuss, what kind of information we need from the community to help inform our recommendation. Now those, in my experience with Leah, were the most productive meetings we had when we had a clear kind of question to explore and a recommendation to make to the board. That's truly the purpose, the way I see it at this committee. And if that, you know, if it's too hard to kind of organize the committee in that way, then I think having separate committees that are issue specific and project specific would make more sense than having a strategic planning committee like a moving ahead advisory group, or we already have a STIF advisory group, a group to advise on, I don't know if the name is still Transit Tomorrow, but the comprehensive, oh my gosh, I can't remember the acronym now.
COA.
Yes.
Comprehensive Operations Analysis.
Operational Analysis, yes.
And we will be having one of those coming up soon. So that'll be another big discussion.
Yeah, so those kind of groups that can really get deep and focus on a topic. While I love, you know, being engaged and being asked questions and learn about the, you know, the GM search, for example, I think there are other venues that might work for LTD to get feedback on that. And of course, you know, folks from this committee could be involved in that process. But I think, you know, if we go in too many different directions, it distracts us from kind of the core purpose of this group and being effective and using, you know, the time that folks volunteer to serve on this committee is valuable. And it's not, you know, if you're not kind of seeing your work on the committee translate into some sort of actionable thing, then that can be tough in terms of keeping folks engaged, especially folks that are busy. Leah, sorry, you want to go?
No, that was great, Amy, and I agree with everything you've said. I think, you know, it is there is an inherent, I think, benefit to meeting in person, right? We could do those small group meetings where we could really dig into something and have more of those like facilitation tools at hand. Then it's just easier to do than on a Zoom call. I think we all know that at this point. But as Amy said, I think having one or two topics that the committee was really focused on, and we went into, you know, a 2-hour meeting with a couple of strategic questions that we were trying to answer. You know, we started with a presentation from staff. We went into, you know, breakouts or if we had enough people and had, you know, 2 questions to answer in those groups and then report back to staff or provide that report back. And I think it allowed us to get deep, as we're saying. I think we also were working on, my recollection of the projects that we've really worked on meaningfully in the last couple of years have been Transit Tomorrow, Moving Ahead, and the Strategic Business Plan. I'm sure there are others, but those are the 3 that really, really stick out to me. And I know, you know, LTD put a ton of resources into those projects, a ton of staff time. And those just made sense for us to comment on and advise the board on. You know, I especially think about like Transit Tomorrow, Moving Ahead as having huge public involvement elements to them as well. And I think this group gave really good feedback to staff on approaching public involvement and making technical transit information accessible. Staff do a great job at that, but I think that's another value add from this group and informing the board. And I think when we have projects that we know are going to maybe be like publicly controversial to an extent, having this group to back up the board and say, we've looked through these materials and we've thought about this and discussed it from a community perspective and inform the board, and having that group to kind of get behind the board as they're making those decisions, I think was valuable. So I guess I think we're mostly on the same page about like really narrowing our focus and picking those one or two things that would be impactful and important for the board to hear from us on, and to really narrow our time together to really get into the weeds on those and give meaningful feedback and back the board up on those tough decisions. It seems like not Transit Tomorrow, but the COA and Moving Ahead are still two of those primary projects that might be valuable for us to continue to focus on. And I think that's fine. I think they're important investments in the community that need to be made. So, and this group would be, is well positioned, I think, to comment on those things. So I think what I always get a little nervous about is when I look at the agenda and there's a lot of like information only. And those are the things where I'm like, do we need to talk about that? Right? Like, or is our time better spent really digging deep on one or two things? So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's great feedback for us. I mean, your purpose isn't just to, learn about us. It's really to dig in and help us, make decisions. And so, I really appreciate that feedback. And, there will be opportunities, pretty soon. Like say the COA, we're just kicking that off. And that's going to be extremely important, and really, we're going to have to really be thoughtful about how we roll that out, and how we reach out to the community, and how we make decisions around that. So I can see us spending quite a bit of time on that, actually. And then moving ahead is kind of later. I think it's, probably not a lot is going to happen moving ahead over the next year or so. But other than kind of work behind the scenes to, kind of get the next steps in place. So I appreciate that, the focus, and bring together, have some specific questions or problems we're trying to solve that you can help us do. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and I will say those agenda setting meetings, Alma and Marty, I think were the place where we came up with those strategic questions, being like, this is where we are in this project. What would be most useful to share with the board or with staff right now, and trying to really narrow the focus to like, here are a couple of questions for discussion for the group.
Thanks, Leah. And thank you, Amy, too. At the top of the conversation, I didn't give you recognition for the leadership that you provided as well, along with Leah. So I appreciate that. Yeah, we really appreciate it. I think, yeah, this is super helpful. And I think part of it too, just some of the reflections on just the short time where I'm not sure how long I've been involved in this, but the time that we've been involved in this, being able to have the, like one of the things that came up was making sure we're not like kind of repeating the same things here in this conversation that the board hears as well, right? So I think that'll be that place where hearing, when we sit down for those agenda setting conversations, to see like, also from hearing from staff and the board, like where are some areas that we would like the SBC to dive deep into. So that's really appreciate that feedback on that, Leah. And I would love from staff, which would be helpful. And again, I'd love to hear from the rest of the team to see at what points you're going to need those conversations to happen, or that information to go back to the board. So I think when we're going to get to this, like how often do we meet? To me, it's like form follows function, right? Like build it around where we need, like, and to Leah's point, like meet when we need to meet. And so, as you know, if the comprehensive operations analysis is coming up, and we know moving ahead, like if we can look at that calendar, because I think that to Leah's point as well, like meeting with intention is what keeps us coming back to the conversations, and keeps us coming back here and keeps us engaged. So that's what would really be helpful for me. Like, I really want to know, like, well, I want to as Amy said, honor the volunteers' time and also honor this time, the staff, like these are dollars spent when you're putting together an agenda or having a meeting and kind of just giving us information, which is important, but that's part of our responsibility to read through those documents and know what's going on as well. So we want to be thoughtful about the time that staff are spending and have get more feedback. So what would be helpful? I mean, is that helpful for you all to like look at the calendar and look at where thinking about where we need to meet and make a proposal for us? And I guess I'm directing that to Mark if that is
yeah, I think that would be really helpful for you. I was hoping we could provide that for you tonight, actually kind of lay it out a year, a year's look at here's the decision points, here's where we can, but we will provide when Tom gets back. I'll have him put that together and get it out to you. About the proposed or kind of draft, I guess, decision points. Things move a little bit, one way or the other at times, but we'll put a year's kind of program together about strategic decisions that we'll need help on, so you're aware, and then you can kind of decide, okay, well. And maybe we can send out a draft schedule saying this month, this, and it might not be every month, but it might be every 2 months or whatever. And then, you can take a look at it and we can talk about, what that looks like and what might work.
Leah?
Yeah, I was just thinking something for another advisory committee I'm on that we do is there's a annual work plan, right? So it has and I think that group meets quarterly and we have 4 things on the work plan, right? So it's pretty slimmed down. And we can talk about whether this is appropriate for this group, but that work plan is then also presented to the board equivalent, right? So here's what we're planning to have SPC focus on, or what SPC is planning to focus on. Does this resonate with you all on the board, knowing what your priorities are for the year? Are there other things you don't see here? And I know we are an independent advisory body, but I think being on the same page with the board too about what we are working on and where they see value getting strategic feedback from us as well, I think. So once maybe Tom drafts that work plan, we look at it as a group and then getting it presented back to the board for their kind of buy-in, and then just making that a practice of doing that on an annual basis. That might help for recruitment and orientation too. People know what they're getting into.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it also helps. With recruitment and knowing where we have gaps and where we need representation. Because I think, to me, I see that's a really good opportunity for us to make sure that we're being really thoughtful about who is helping us give strategic feedback about what's happening in our community, and representation is really important to make sure we have folks that are utilizing and going to be affected by the decisions we make, having some space for that voice. So yeah, really appreciate that, and connecting it back to the board so it's all like a nice bundle and fits together. Mark? Sorry, you came off mute, so I wasn't sure if you wanted to say something.
No, I just didn't go on mute after I got done talking.
No worries. I appreciate that. So again, I want to be really thoughtful. So we are going to, and again, being aware of space, Philip, I want to make sure there's space if you have anything to share, and also no pressure if you are just here to listen. I totally appreciate that. I'll give you a second.
I guess I was just more so wondering, how are we doing the outreach to find a person for this position? And I currently work with OED, business employment specialist. So I'm literally meeting people who are looking for jobs, but I was just curious what's the outreach and where can they find this position?
That's a great question.
So you're talking about the GM position?
Yes.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, it's on our website, and they or it will, if it's not yet, it will be, because I had that discussion recently. And it's, you know, they use LinkedIn, Indeed, and all the, quite a few other, you know, digital sites for recruitment.
Thank you, Mark. And Philip, we can maybe connect also with Mark offline about that too, just for some of the, if you have some resources. And my apologies, I was thinking also about recruitment for this committee, but I think once we get intentional, in addition to, you know, you're asking about GM, but for this committee recruitment, once we get intentional, as Leah said, that once we kind of know where we're going, we can know who we want to bring along to help with to help us get there. Marty, you have your hand up?
I was just going to exactly say what you just said, so I'm going to put my hand back down. I think Leah and Amy's input was great, and I think that's going to help us a lot with the structure and continual process. Because I'm not a big fan of a lot of meetings. I'm just more of a fan of structured meetings. So putting that together, I think that was a great exclamation point on what we're trying to do. Because I think being able to have a structured idea of where we're going, yeah, we could still go back to quarterly or whatever, as long as we know what it is we're doing. And that would actually be more attractive to people. And we could actually even pinpoint that and say, this is when we know we're going to need some people at this point in time. So if you can be thinking about this, then we know what channels to communicate that down by. So I think that's a very well said. So but basically, I'm just saying what everybody else said. So not really unique.
Mike, you came off mute. Do you have anything to add? And no pressure again, just noticing.
Not on this topic, but when we get to the end, there's a question I wanted to throw in.
Okay, perfect. Leah?
Yeah, I don't have a solution for this, so I hate to like throw out another problem, but we've got, what, 4 or 5 vacant positions, not vacant, but a couple vacant positions and a couple of folks that don't come to meetings, right? So I think having kind of a strategic work plan that we can present to folks and kind of get them re-engaged is important. But I guess I'll just flag again, right? We've got elected officials on this committee, how we either keep their engagement or are like strategic about how they engage in this group. It just seems like a shame to have like only half of our committee show up every meeting. And I understand it's a lot in those roles, but I don't have a solution, but just something for us to think about. And I don't know what the status is with replacing Franny with someone from ODOT. And I want to say there's maybe another that I'm not thinking of, but it's a continuing challenge, I know, but.
And we can reach out to the elected for sure, you know, and replacing Franny. I don't think they've got a temporary person in her position right now. So, you know, we'll keep our eye on that one, but certainly reaching out to Greg and Joe Burney has now lost his seat. So, you know, Dave Lovell is going to replace him. I mean, in a position, but I'll talk to Steve Mokrański maybe and see who makes sense to, you know, put in on the position. So anyway, we can do that work.
Thanks, Mark. Mark, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I'm just going to follow with that as well as the other members on the committee. If there's any personal relationships, because that's what I've loved about Lane County is it's about relationships. You know, if we're waiting till the meeting to say where are these folks, we all know when they're coming. We all know, we get the emails. So if any of us have personal relationships with any of these folks, maybe we should you know reach out and say, hey, what's up? Are you gonna be there? Are you gonna be there? Just a suggestion for me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, everybody that's here I know. The rest I don't. As far as the folks that aren't in a official capacity. So just a recommendation I would make if any of you have personal relationships, reach out.
Thanks, Marty. And I do, yeah, absolutely. And I think on that too, like not putting you on the hot seat, but as chair and co-chair, we can also contact people the week before the time, or as we get our kind of like our plan together, being able to say, you need to be here. Or, I mean, I also have no problem being like, this is either required to be on this committee, or again, depending on the person, and then also just holding them accountable to be here, because these are going to be important things, so we can bring that back up. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't want to overlook. In fact, I sent a note to Camille thanking her today. I think she does a great job of reminding us. And something I really appreciate is her sending the email with the link just before the meeting, so I don't have to dig through 30 emails to try to find that link.
That is huge.
Yeah, it's big, and it really helps me. So thank you, Camille.
Yes, thank you, Camille.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for that, bringing that up, Mike, definitely. And again, just thinking the ways that we can be helpful, as the heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? The chairs, I have no problem picking up the phone and calling people and letting them know that they need to be here. Because again, I think for me, just look at the clarity around who is required as in their roles. And, again, Mark, we're happy to help with that. Just making sure folks are communicated with. I have no problem calling people, pinging them. I'm okay to be that little gnat that bugs them. But yeah, so I appreciate, we're going to hear from Tom and the team about where we need to be and where we need to be making decisions. And that's going to help inform when we meet and how often we meet. I know that one of the things that Andrew was sharing was that he knew there were some places that he really wanted some input from the SPC specifically. So it's around about moving ahead. So I know that there's that need. And so and then you all will go back to the board and kind of see how all these things get together. So the board knows they're kind of waiting on when they're going to be looking for feedback from the SPC, so that we can talk as a team and inform them. That will help us also, because again, coming back to Leah's point, it's kind of tough to come to a meeting and you all are here and we appreciate it. And there's folks that aren't here. So we need that commitment. And I do think that once we have a plan in place and people see and know that there's going to be that's the carrot, and then we can, and again, that helps us set that expectation and hold people accountable to be present and be here. Okay, I want to be really thoughtful about anything else about the purpose and the schedule. Mark, did we totally derail you and what the plan was at this point, or
no, not at all. Man, we've got exactly what we needed out of you guys in terms of path forward. So that's great. I think the only outstanding question that maybe doesn't have to be dealt with tonight, but it was briefly discussed about in-person meetings and the value of those, and being able to kind of have deeper discussions than you can on Zoom. And we have to do it tonight. We can just kind of take a look at the environment, keep our eye out, and to kind of make the decision on the when we need to. So
I appreciate that. Sorry, that was also something that Leah brought that up, and I do think I recognize that there are technology options for us to be able to have like breakout sessions or to talk about things. I recognize that might make it funky with the recording and different things, and I trust that LTD will be able to look at that. And it may, so as you're building out your plan, thinking about that space, maybe also considering that if there's a way for us to do that, and maybe it's just, again, thinking a little bit differently about how we do it. But I just bringing that up. So figuring out how we can have that space built out too. So I don't know what that looks like. I don't know the answer. Like Leah said, there's a lot of things that we know we'd like, but I'm not sure of the answer right now, but I know we'll figure out something.
Yeah. Well, we've learned a lot about virtual meetings, and that we can do breakouts and other things. So we'll make it work however we need to.
Great. All right. If there's nothing else to discuss around this, and again, Mark, if you have everything you need, and because that has the notes, and there's no more feedback from members. Okay. We will go ahead and move on to, let's see, action items for information.
You're just about at the end of the agenda.
I know. I'm kind of like, I'm a little bit thrown off. I'm like, wait a minute, 7:25.
Go, girl.
but I think Mike said he might have some comments and things.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Where did Mike fit in here? Mike, I'm just going to pass the baton over to you.
So I'm getting the impression that there's going to be some restructuring in the way STIF is done, and I'm not suggesting that we spend time talking about that. But if that's in fact true, I imagine that LTD is going to be sending some kind of a report to the board, and if you could share that report with us, We don't even need to talk about it, but just so that we could be updated if that's going to be happening and what that restructuring might look like.
You want to comment on that, Cosette? You're the
Sure, I can speak to
resident
that.
expert.
I can speak to that. Thanks, Mike, for bringing that up. I appreciate the opportunity to have that conversation. So there have been some changes in STIF funding. So STF funding, so our special transportation funding that has been provided through separate funding and a separate process is going to get wrapped up now into our STIF process. So that piece of funding that specifically funds services for older adults and people with disabilities that we've had a separate committee for, that will all become part of the STIF process moving forward. It's been a couple of years since we've done this, since we created our formula plan. So we're in the process right now of sending out emails to the folks who have been on our STIF advisory committee, just to find out if they plan to continue to serve. Then we're going to be taking a look at the makeup of that committee. So there's some changes in the requirements of the representatives in that committee. So we'll be taking a look at that committee, and we'll be doing that fairly soon. We also just started a new committee. It's if you're familiar with the TPC, which helps to support MPC, a few acronyms there. What it is we've created a committee of basically agency staff to get together and have conversations about projects and about our plans and about our initiatives and how this funding can uniquely be used to leverage dollars or to leverage programs, and how we can work together to move programs forward that specifically address the priorities of that funding. So we just had our first kickoff meeting with that group, but we're going to be getting deep into the STIF, kind of the solicitation of the projects, the vetting of those projects. And again, this committee can provide, again, you're an independent committee. This committee is one of those stops on the way to creating that plan. So we will be coming to you, I would expect at least a couple of times before we go to the board. The application is due in February of 2023. So we'll have to have our board approval in January in order to meet that timeline. So we don't have a lot of time. But we have a good process, I think, outlined, and happy to come and share more with you about that as we, again, identify those STIF advisory committee members and potentially create subcommittees or work groups within that committee to address some of the pieces such as our STF funding. So, Leah?
Yeah, so am I remembering correctly that in the past for the STIF committee, you've had a couple members of SPC sit on that? Is that correct?
I believe we did. I don't think
I did. I chaired it for a couple of terms.
Yeah, and Amy, maybe Amy and Sherry. I don't know why that's sticking with me, but
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how I remember that. But
yeah, you have a great memory. So, and I actually was just looking at the membership, so I should know that. You have a much better memory than I do. Again, we're sending out. I believe that everyone who was on the STIF advisory committee, their roles are still valid. So I believe that they're still current. So we're checking in with each of those folks, and then we're going to be looking at the groups that they represent and filling in any of the gaps, as well as identifying representative for the new required positions for the committee. So Leah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And if someone is really interested in volunteering to be on that committee, happy to get that information.
Well, I think it's a super important group. So having especially if you guys are planning to come to SPC, having at least someone from this group sit on it makes a lot of sense to me. So I guess that's where my question was leading. Yes. And when you say required representatives, so ODOT is requiring some level of is it related to diversity? Is it specific groups? What is the requirements?
So they have a whole list of people who they feel are important to include and involve, and you can pick and choose what groups are represented on your committee. However, there are some that are required. So again, with the STF dollars now being allocated through this committee, they want to make sure that we have someone, for instance, who's an older adult or a person with disabilities, as well as veterans. So that, again, they've just included more categories. BIPOC is a new category for this committee. So again, that one is not a required representative, but a suggested representative. So again, we're taking a look at all of that.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
And thanks, Leah, for the questions. I think, yeah, I really appreciate this. And, you know, it's kind of like taking notes. And so we have like, you know, February and working backwards to figuring out when would our team be helpful to have some feedback. And so I'm really looking forward to love calendaring and making sure you have all of that there. It's really helpful. And I think one of the things too, just from what you said, Cassette, that there's for this particular, for the STF requirements, there are recommendations and required folks to be present. I think that's also helpful, just thinking about the makeup of our committee. If we are looking at space where we want to pull feedback from folks and have representation, it would be nice just kind of see like if there is a tool out there or a requirement, that could be something that would also be helpful for us. So we have our elected officials that have serve a purpose for being on this committee because they're able to help advocate and share. And also as an independent group, it is important, I think, important for us to have representation from the different voices in our community. So maybe that's also something you could share just for, as we're thinking about how to recruit, who to recruit. And again, I don't know if this is on there, but I do, we are United Way, we are Lane County, sorry. We are Lane Transit Districts, and it's Lane County. So thinking about the rural folks too. And I think about how we can make sure that we're potentially bringing some of those voices to the table. And I know that that might be, just as we're learning a little bit more about kind of this strategy for LTD, I just think it would be helpful to think about there's folks out there in all areas of our community. And I would like to see if that's a space that we can make sure that some of them are represented in this on the SPC. And that could also be, again, that funnel to the board. So that's just a little plug for that. So I would love to see, I think that the committee would love to see that list of folks that are recommended to be present so we can think about our outreach for recruitment.
We'd be happy to send that out. Thank you so much. Actually, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah.
And I'm going to channel my best Tom here and say that I've taken all of the notes, and it's just been really great conversation. And what I'm hearing and reflecting, just for your information, is just an interest in really taking that deep dive. Less information, more collaboration, more roll up your sleeves, more have those questions ahead of time so you all can vet them with the folks who you represent and come prepared to have conversations. And I also think that's going to help with things like your engagement. So I just want to say kudos to you all for really great reflections and great work. And it's just up to us now to make it all happen.
I just take my hats off to Alma. She's been great to follow with this process. So I'm just doing what she tells me to do.
I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate Mike and the folks like Leah and Amy who, you know, we have this process in place. And I mean, I'm not blaming COVID for everything, but we kind of forget when we come to this digital space and then we're like, what did we do before? And so, you know, I want to recognize that as well. There was a structure in place. We kind of deviated a bit and now we're coming back to it. So yeah, if it's kind of not reinventing the wheel, but not having the experience of the wheel before we came on. So I really appreciate sort of the backs of the folks that were here before.
And yeah, definitely trust and thank the committee and the folks that put 2 rookies in charge. I don't know what you guys were thinking.
Hey, Mike.
We were all rookies at one time.
Okay, that's fair.
Thank you. Amy, I saw you come off of mute.
Oh yeah, I wanted to share my thanks too to you, Alma and Marty, for your leadership, the time commitment, and to staff also for all the work that you do, helping us function as a group and outside of that as well. So thanks.
Thanks, Amy.
We appreciate everyone. Well, I want to be really thoughtful too. If there's nothing else, I mean, we might be a half an hour. We might get out of here by 7, but we will. So is there anything else for the good of the order? Any other feedback, questions?
I'd like to stall for 30 minutes.
Marty.
You might be sitting by yourself, Marty.
Exactly. We appreciate everyone's support. And Philip, if you have more questions about the GM search, I'm sure Mark is available to chat some more offline beyond this conversation. Oh, go ahead.
Ask a question really quick. Sorry. When is our next meeting? Do we have one on the calendar? I'm sorry, I'm not looking at my calendar, but
no, that's a good question.
Are we still on a quarterly, or maybe I lost the thread there?
I think that's where we're sort of
looking that up. I believe that a doodle poll is going to be coming out for a potential meeting in August, and after that, there is one scheduled for the end of September.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, and there was a conversation in one of the planning sessions. One of the sessions we were talking about, and there's some voting or some feedback that Andrew wanted for moving ahead, and I think that might be where the August meeting has come in. But we will get that lined out a little bit more here shortly.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, Andrew got married and left the country for like a month. So it's like, really. Geez, the young guys. And then Tom is in Hawaii for his first time for a week or so. But they'll be back and ready to go. So
awesome.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Any other questions? All right. Well, appreciate everyone. Enjoy the sun. Stay hydrated. And thank you. And we are adjourning at 6:56 p.m.
Thanks. Mike has time to get to the baseball game.